Crown Times Radio.
Well, the asylum reforms are on the front page of many of the papers. The Guardian says the most sweeping reforms to asylum rules in a generation will be unveiled. The Daily Mail says lawyers and Labour MPs will torpedo Shabana Mahmood's asylum plan. She was warned last night that her crackdown on asylum seekers faced being thwarted by these left-wing lawyers. The Daily Telegraph has a quote here: take back migrants or face a visa ban. And that's the same angle that the Times has gone with as well, that visa ban for countries if they refuse to take those individuals back. Well, Ted Newson, political commentator with Young Voices UK, is here to go through the papers. Ted, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie.
What the government want to do is avoid the situation like we've got details of in the paper today in Crowborough. This is protesters who say, we do not want, to the government, to the local authorities, you to house asylum seekers in the military base that is there. And the government have said, look, they want to close asylum hotels, therefore they need to find alternative accommodation. And they face off about 2,000 people who were protesting over the weekend. Do you think the protesters have got it right, or the government?
Absolutely, Rosie. Well, these protests are happening all over the country. Near me, we're seeing an RAF base, RAF Wethersfield, being occupied by asylum seekers, and people are exactly the same in terms of demonstrating on the streets and getting out there. Out of the 21,000 population, we're seeing 2,000 protesters take to the streets to protest these 540 asylum seekers that the government wants to move into military accommodation. Now, this is a beautiful area of East Sussex, and I totally understand the concerns of the residents in not wanting a whole load of documented young males in their local area.
So what are you suggesting the alternative would be?
I think it's a very tricky situation because we do need our international obligations, but at the same time, things have gone too far. The Overton window has shifted. And so one of the options that people are proposing that I'd be in favour of is overseas processing. Overseas processing followed by either deportations if they're ineligible, or simply letting them stay if they are genuine asylum seekers.
I mean, that isn't one of the suggestions that are being proposed by the Home Secretary today. It sounds as though you're in the same camp as the Conservatives and perhaps Reform to say they are not sufficient enough.
I am. They're not quite sufficient enough. It's promising to see the Labour Party talk tough on immigration, but we've seen this for the entire Parliament. We've seen over 10,000 people cross the Channel just in Shabana Mahmood's tenure. We can expect to see more before we see less, personally.
Yeah, but I think that is the point, isn't it? They've got to put in policies that need time to play out, to work. I mean, in Denmark, they've had really, really sort of extraordinary success. And you've just said it will get worse before it gets better. So how long, I guess, a time frame would you give the current government from now until when before you could conclusively say, look, I don't think your policies are working?
I think going forward from this, we could see about 6 months. I think if it hasn't gone through to the gangs and to the people, smugglers who are getting these people across the Channel, it clearly hasn't worked. And if people are still streaming in at the same rates, they understand the risks, they understand they might not be getting as much as maybe if they'd gone a year ago, but they're still getting a relatively generous offer compared to the rest of Europe. And that's what we need to clamp down on.
Okay. The doctors' strikes, front page of the Times today. The NHS has said fewer doctors are going on strike than in any previous walkouts. What do you think is going on here, Ted?
Well, I think the doctors are just tired of the BMA's rhetoric. It says here in the Times that doctors were embarrassed by the BMA's rhetoric of begging for more pay despite receiving a pay increase of 28.9% since 2022. I mean, for goodness sake, people have walked out for 52 days over the last 3 years. To me, that sounds like you're not doing your job and you're looking to be opportunistic.
Well, the BMA would say their job is to get the very best pay deal for the doctors.
I think ultimately we're going back to a kind of 1970s period where the Labour Party is kowtowing to the unions, this time because of reverence over the NHS and a necessity to get people treated. But for some reason, public opinion has gone in the way of blaming the government when doctors go out on strike, rather than the strikers themselves when they've been given such generous pay rises, Rosie.
I don't think the government are still kowtowing to the unions. Would you say that that's right? I mean, Wes Streeting has said just absolutely flat out, look, there's no money here, and the best offer you've got expires if you go on strike because we won't afford to be able to give it to you. So, he's been about as bullish as you could imagine.
It's a fair point. Wes Streeting was generous as you like before the election. He saw what was happening with the Conservative Party and how the junior doctors weren't making any headway with them. And so he took a bold move. He went into the media and said, look, I will kowtow to all of your demands. I'll give you a pay rise because I want doctors in work and I want doctors with good working conditions, which is a noble venture.
Yeah, I'm not sure he expressed it in quite those terms. But yes, it was a very generous payoff. I think that's why there's so much fury now that they have come back to say they're striking again. Well, the deal the health secretary's offered those resident doctors is one that would create more training places, give doctors priority over international medics, cover out-of-pocket expenses like exams. But my understanding is that sort of deal does have an expiry date on it. There'll be more on the doctor strike a little bit later on breakfast. Now, the Green Party are having a really buoyant time under its new leader, Zach Polansky. And the Times questions this morning, what will the Green Party do with this extra £4 million? Because donations to the Green Party are surging, and it, I think, is really credit to Zach Polansky.
Well, Zach Polansky has played the media round brilliantly, going on Question Time, getting himself into the media. He's done exactly the same as famous populists we've seen in the past, Nigel Farage in this country, Donald Trump. And he's really put on a populist socialist spin on it with a focus on the environment. So what he's essentially generated an awful lot of public interest. I've had a couple of friends who have written articles about him. He gets public opinion. He knows what he has to do and what he has to say to get people on his side. And from that, he's been able to take from the Labour Party and kind of bash the new Jeremy Corbyn party into obscurity, because this is some kind of Polansky socialism that those on the left of Britain find more attractive than Jeremy Corbyn. It's a fresher face. It's got a green agenda, which Jeremy Corbyn has lacked somewhat, more than a broader socialist message. And so I think people are really resonating with that.
The party's polling as high as 17% in some polls. It's sort of a level never seen before in the Green Party's history. So, yeah, Zach Polansky absolutely has sort of revitalised, almost revolutionised the Green Party's prospects to the detriment, I think, of Jeremy Corbyn, but also to the Labour Party as well, who, of course, as we've been hearing, are sort of tacking ever so slightly more to the right. Those young people that they might be attracting could be voting at school, we find out today inside the Times. The government intend to modernise, I'm quoting here, modernise the voting experience by bringing in multi-day voting and pop-up hubs in busy public spaces. Now, for teenagers, that might mean that they vote at school.
Yes, it could be that people are going to school and voting at the end of the day. It's certainly an odd prospect to someone old-fashioned like me, but it could happen. And it's probably quite a good way of getting young people to vote. The government has proposed this, well, they've vowed to lower the voting age down to 16, and putting polling stations in the very place that 16-year-olds are most likely to be at the end of the day, which is leaving school, is a good part of getting people engaged in politics. So no complaints from me about that.
Yeah, we know it's going to be so different as the voting age is lowered from 18 to 16. Some of the things ministers are looking at are the possibility of opening polling stations before election day. Normally by convention that's a Thursday, you've got the whole day. So we could have a sort of more American style system where you vote earlier. I wonder if we would that might feel quite strange and not quite our culture. We'll see. Now, I must talk to you, Ted, about the front page story on the Times today. And a lot of people are thinking about right now their finances, particularly as the budget looms. 3/4 of top-rate taxpayers, so people earning more than £125,000 a year, said they didn't feel or they didn't consider themselves to be rich. Would you say someone earning that pay packet is rich?
I wouldn't, no. I think this is a prime example of fiscal drag where £100,000 a year may sound like a very generous salary. I certainly wouldn't mind earning £100,000 myself. But at the same time, when 3/4 of those high rate payers don't think they're rich, there's a problem there. And I think predominantly this is going to be due to, one, lifestyle inflation. That is people expanding how lavish their lifestyle is once they get a promotion at work and start earning a bit more money. And also the cost of living. Because to rent in London, to go to the shop and buy luxury groceries each week, you're paying an absolute arm and a leg these days compared to where you were 5 years ago. And it's not on. I mean, according to a Times survey here, 76% of those paying the top rate of tax did not feel rich at all. That's not right. We need to bring back prosperity to this country. We need rich people to feel like they're rich, because when they feel like they're rich, they feel generous. And we need to get down the cost of living for the rest of the country. Ultimately, the broadest shoulders aren't the ones paying the bills. It is these Henrys, high earner, not rich yet, who are maybe a couple of years older than me. They've been given a few promotions. They're not rich yet, but they're earning the money, who need to be supported, because they are going to be the ones contributing the most to our tax system over the next few years. And if we don't help these people, they're just going to move over to the US or to Dubai, to a hotter country maybe with better tax rules. So we need to do everything we can to keep these people in our country and keep them paying tax.
The survey also goes on, which I think then slightly undermines the strength of the first start. But I wonder if this makes you feel rich, Ted. So the polling, this is more than 4,000 people, suggested that owning a house outright, having more than £1 million in cash savings, and earning a six-figure salary were unlikely to make us feel well off. I think if you had £1 million in cash savings, that person is in the rich category, surely.
You would think so, to be fair.
So
I didn't see that there.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, but it's about how you feel, not actually necessarily what's the reality. And that is partly the problem for the government, that people who have got high income don't necessarily feel they are, and then are maybe not acting in a way they would. Or conversely, as you mentioned, people who do feel wealthy want to protect their wealth and maybe feel like staying in the UK isn't the best way to do that. Ted, thank you very much for your time going through the papers this morning.